I understand you're requesting a full YouTube voiceover script, focusing on a professional, cinematic tone, with a natural, conversational flow. Here's the script based on the story outline you provided. It was a moment Jamal Washington will never forget that had just settled into his first-class seat on Skyline Airlines, the luxury of his hard-earned success around him. But then, 20 minutes after the plane was supposed to take off, a flight attendant walked over to him, her face pale, and asked him to move. He looked up, confused. "What's going on?" he asked. Her eyes flickered to his boarding pass, then to his face, as if confirming something she wasn't sure about. "I'm afraid, sir, we need to move you. A more elite member has arrived." And with that, Jamal was forced out of his first-class seat, moved to the back of the plane, and replaced by a white businessman with an entitled air about him. It didn't matter that Jamal had paid for that seat. It didn't matter that he was a CEO of the few black CEOs in the tech industry was treated like he didn't belong. And that moment would change everything. Jamal wasn't just any businessman. His journey had been anything but easy. He came from Southside Chicago, where his father worked double shifts in a factory, and his mother cleaned office buildings at night. They had little, but they had grit. His father always said, "Never forget where you come from, but don't let anyone tell you where you can go." That was the mantra that powered him through the long nights, the endless rejections, and, eventually, the corporate battles. Jamal had built Phoenix Innovations, his tech company, from the ground up. And now, with the acquisition of Globee Tech, he had just become the CEO of Skyline Airlines' parent company. But no matter how much he achieved, Jamal couldn't outrun the reality that came with being black in America. Even when he was dressed in a custom-tailored suit, with an MIT degree in hand and billions in assets, he was still treated like he was out of place. When he walked into an expensive boutique to browse, a sales associate had once called security, thinking he couldn't afford anything in the store. It didn't matter who Jamal was. He was a black man in a system designed for someone else. And so, he had come to this flight Skyline Airlines Flight 1287 not as the CEO of Globee Tech, but as just another customer. He wanted to see how the airline treated its passengers when they didn't know who he was. Lydia, his assistant, had warned him about the risks of traveling commercially, but Jamal was determined to experience the company firsthand. If he was going to run this airline, he needed to understand how the everyday customer was treated. The flight was delayed, and Jamal took a seat in the terminal, watching the passengers around him. His eyes scanned the room, noting the looks of impatience, the sighs of frustration from travelers who knew their plans had just been thrown off track. When boarding finally began, Jamal made his way to the gate. The agent scanned his boarding pass, hesitated, then handed it back with a cold smile. "Enjoy your flight, sir," she said, her tone noticeably cooler than it had been with the white passengers ahead of him. Inside the cabin, things only got worse. Jamal settled into his first-class seat, a window seat he'd specifically requested. He was just about to open a business magazine when Rebecca Miller, a flight attendant, approached. She didn't greet him. She didn't offer him a drink. Instead, she asked him for his boarding pass in the most impersonal way possible. When she handed him a plastic cup with water, her eyes didn't even meet his. She moved on, offering a warm greeting to the older white couple across the aisle. Jamal took a deep breath, reminding himself that this was exactly why his work mattered. He couldn't let these small indignities get to him. But then it happened. A commotion erupted in the front of the cabin. A white man, Mr. Huntington, was arguing with another flight attendant, Sarah. He was demanding an upgrade, throwing a tantrum about his loyalty to the airline. Sarah tried to calm him down, but he wouldn't listen. Jamal didn't even need to look up to know what was about to happen next. He had seen it before. The entitled passengers always got what they wanted, while people like him were treated as if they didn't belong. Rebecca came over to him, a fake smile plastered on her face. "Sir, we have an issue with your seating assignment," she said. Jamal raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "There's an elite status member who needs to be accommodated." "I'm afraid you'll have to move," she said. "Move?" Jamal asked. "This seat was purchased weeks ago, and it's mine. I'm not being downgraded for someone else's entitlement." But Rebecca insisted, even claiming there was a system error. Jamal wasn't having it. He demanded to speak to the head flight attendant, and Thomas Carter, a tall man with graying temples, arrived shortly after. When Jamal showed him the boarding pass, Thomas looked over it briefly, dismissing it immediately. "We're going to have to insist you comply," Thomas said. "Our airline reserves the right to adjust seating as necessary." Jamal stared at him, disbelief flooding his chest. "What grounds?" he asked. Thomas responded as if it were nothing, casually dismissing the very fact that Jamal had a confirmed seat. The cabin had grown silent. Passengers around them were watching, some in discomfort, others clearly siding with the flight attendants. Jamal knew he was at a crossroads: fight for his seat and risk further humiliation, or move and avoid the scene. With the Atlanta meeting hanging in the balance, he decided to leave, but not before making a clear statement. "I want your names, and I will be filing a formal complaint," he said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. As Jamal made his way to the back of the plane, he passed Mr. Huntington, now lounging comfortably in the seat Jamal had paid for. He watched as Rebecca served him with a warmth and deference she had never shown Jamal. "Sorry about that unpleasantness," she said. The word stung. Jamal squeezed into an economy seat, wedged between two large passengers who had claimed both armrests. He took out his phone and began documenting the entire ordeal. He could feel the weight of the situation, his status, his wealth. None of it mattered when it came to the way he was treated. As the flight progressed, Jamal noticed the glaring biases that had now become the norm. White passengers received quick service, while passengers of color were left waiting. Jamal overheard Rebecca and Kelly, another flight attendant, mocking his sneakers and making demeaning comments. He knew this wasn't just about his experience. It was a systemic issue, one that ran deep through Skyline Airlines culture. Jamal quietly sent a coded message to his assistant Lydia: "Time to activate Protocol Renaissance." He was going to make sure this moment wasn't just about him. He was going to change the entire company. And that's exactly what he did. Jamal spent the remainder of the flight gathering testimonies from other passengers, documenting their stories, and preparing to expose Skyline's discriminatory practices. By the time the plane landed, he had enough evidence to begin his plan for change. This wasn't just about a few bad employees, it was about a culture that allowed this behavior to fester. The next day, Jamal called for an emergency meeting. He called the entire flight crew to a conference room, where he revealed to them that he was the new CEO of Globee Tech, the parent company of Skyline Airlines. The looks of horror on their faces were priceless. He played the recordings: Rebecca and Kelly's casual racism, Thomas's dismissive attitude toward the medical emergency, and Mr. Huntington's treatment of passengers as lesser beings. "Do you know why this happens?" Jamal asked. "Because the system has allowed it. And that ends today." Jamal made it clear that there would be a complete overhaul of Skyline's policies and practices. The crew members were suspended, and an independent review board was established to investigate all complaints filed in the past 5 years. But Jamal wasn't done. The media picked up the story, and within hours, his name was trending. Customers showed their support for his decision, posting their own stories of discrimination and backing the changes he was implementing. The momentum was on his side. As Jamal moved forward with the restructuring of Skyline Airlines, he didn't just focus on the changes that were happening within the company. He knew the real work was in creating a culture where everyone was treated with dignity. It was about building a better, more inclusive company, not just for the shareholders, but for the people who worked there and for the customers who relied on it. Jamal's decision to confront the discrimination head-on wasn't just morally right, it turned out to be great business. Customer satisfaction increased, complaints dropped, and Skyline's revenue went up. He had proven that ethical leadership and business success weren't mutually exclusive. The real victory wasn't just in proving his critics wrong. It was in creating lasting change, making sure that no one else would ever have to experience the kind of humiliation he had faced. And so, Jamal's legacy was born not just as a businessman, but as a leader who was willing to fight for justice, even when it wasn't easy. What began as a single, personal injustice turned into a catalyst for an entire corporate revolution. And Jamal, well, he didn't just stand up for what was right, turned the tables, and changed the system for good. So what do you think? Do you believe Jamal's approach was the right one? Or should he have taken a different path? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if this story inspired you. Real change is possible. It starts with one person.